Hello, welcome to my session on modernizing Drupal core default markup. I'm going to continue on the topic of starter kit theme, which we covered on the keynote earlier today. So let's get started. So I'm Lauri Escola. On Drupal.org, you can find me with the nickname Lauri with 3 I's. I'm a staff software engineer at Akuya, and I'm based in Helsinki. I'm also a Drupal front-end framework manager and a theme system maintainer. So Classy is the core theme that ships default markup and CSS with some sensible defaults, in comparison to stable theme, which does contain minimal markup and CSS. However, if you look at Classy today and compare it to Classy that shipped with the initial release of Drupal 8, they would be almost identical. The reason for that is that we have to be careful when making changes to Classy, because all changes to Classy cause a risk of breaking existing themes that are extending Classy. Practically speaking, Classy markup and CSS are frozen at the moment. So what does it mean that our default markup and CSS are frozen? It means that we cannot change markup, including classes, element types, and CSS. Basically, any kind of CSS rules, when they get changed, that could cause disruption to teams that are extending Classy. All of these things are critical to solving bugs, especially when it comes to accessibility. And this is led into a situation where we are shipping known bugs as part of Classy that we are unable to fix because fixing them would require changing markup or CSS, which we consider frozen because of the BC promise that we are making. We're also unable to do any refactoring of markup or CSS since most of it would be considered disruptive. So how did we get here? Let's take a look at some of the decisions that created the current situation. I'd like to mention that I'm not trying to point out these events to blame on anyone or any particular decision. My sole purpose is to provide context to what has happened. So in DrupalCon Austin, an array of decisions started that has taken us to where we are at the moment. A group of front-end contributors ran a survey. They tried to better understand how core could better serve front-end developers. One of the findings was that there was a good number of people who expected the default market to be less opinionated. They felt that Drupal core default market was bloated. So that included IDs, classes, and lots of nested HTML elements. Another finding was that front-end developers didn't want to write PHP. It was now possible to write themes without PHP because of Drupal 8 just added trick templating engine. However, at the time, a big chunk of the markup was still generated in render arrays and preprocess functions. So to solve these problems, the group of developers passionate about frontend met at DrupalCon Austin. They came up with a solution that would include creating a new theme, Classy. The plan was to remove as many CSS classes and files from module preprocess functions and templates as possible, and move them to Classy. In the last year of Drupal 8 development, we made a lot of good progress. However, not all of the work was done by the release of Drupal 8. This is partly due to the large scope and due to all of the key contributors shifting focus to Drupal 8 release blocking issues. After all, at that time, it was most important for us to ship Drupal 8 on time rather than fix markup issues. The release process at the time was that we would not have been allowed to make any changes to core markup until the major development branch was open. So essentially, when Drupal 9 branch was open, we would be allowed to start making markup changes again. So in DrupalCon Barcelona, which was a few months before the release, we discussed how we would handle the leftover issues. We expected at the time the Drupal 8 release cycle would be likely a long one. It took quite a long to build Drupal 8, so we expected that it will likely take quite a long to ship Drupal 9 as well. And for that reason, we wanted to come up with a solution that would allow us to continue working on improving default markup and CSS. So this is how Stable was born. It was added as another layer between modules and Classy to allow us to continue with removing classes from core. So this is essentially how the themes looked like when Drupal 8 shipped. This is more or less true for Drupal 9 as well. We have now a couple of additional themes on top of this. What you can see here is the light blue themes are the ones that are internal. They can be changed. So 7, Bardic, Stark. Stark is basically just core module markup. Those can be changed. And then we have Classy and Stable, which are frozen. They are the ones where we provide BC for people that are extending those teams. They are part of our API promise. So the decision that finally held at all markup changes in Classy was a decision to implement continuous upgrade paths. That means all BC changes need to be made by deprecating the old behavior first. This is great for site authors because upgrading sites is much easier. This is great for teams that are extending Classy as well, because their team would continue to just work. They wouldn't have to do any work to upgrade to the next major release. However, it creates a challenge for how to maintain markup and CSS, because we cannot make changes there between the major releases like we've done before. So deprecating code doesn't make sense in markup or CSS, and the only option we were left with was to deprecate whole teams at once. Or does any of the people in the audience have ideas how we could deprecate, for example, a CSS rule? I assume that we don't have ideas on how to do that because it's not a programming language. It's really challenging. So for this reason, we have stable and stable 9 teams at the moment. There's no upgrade path from stable to stable 9. We're not also expecting users to upgrade from stable to stable 9, which would be sort of the same experience users are getting if we are introducing arbitrary markup and CSS changes in major releases. So in 2019, as we started preparing for Drupal 9, we finally wanted to start working on improving that situation. We discussed this in the DrupalCon Seattle 2019 sprints and came up with a multi-step plan, which ended up spanning across the Drupal 9 and Drupal 10 releases. There are still many steps left to complete, but so far we have made good progress. One of the major milestones in the plan was a new starter kit theme. So the new starter kit theme will change how Drupal core ships its default markup. Instead of shipping our default markup in the base theme that front-end developers inherit, we create a starting point for front-end developers to fork. This approach is similar to some contrib projects like Basic and Zen. They provide a CLI tool, which then generate a theme from sort of starting point that they provide. I want to emphasize that we are not planning to get rid of base themes or the inheritance. We are simply changing how a markup is shipped in core. There will continue to exist valid use cases for base themes. For example, an organization like university that has multiple teams could benefit from having a base theme. Their use case is quite different from us because they have visibility to the teams that are extending the base theme. So they can sort of assess what is the impact of any particular change. They could even test for regressions automatically when they introduce them, because they could have integration testing. But as Drupal core, we don't have any visibility to how folks are extending Classy, which is unfortunate. So any change to markup or CSS could be considered disruptive to some team because of that's just the way sort of markup and CSS is. So I have a brief video to show you how the starter kit theme works. A new starter kit theme proposed to be added to Drupal core. I'm going to start by pulling these changes to my local environment. We can see a merge request over here. So this is essentially what I need to take locally. I've already done that. So as you can see, I have that branch on my local environment. So we are good to go with that. What I'm going to do next is check the API changes from the issue summary. I'm going to copy this command, which will print all of the different configuration options that this command has. As you can see, the command that we just ran is for a PHP file in core scripts Drupal. So that's a Symfony console app, which we already have in core. And then as part of this issue, we just added a new command to generate a theme. Over here, you can see that we require one argument for a machine name. So that's the machine name of the newly generated theme that you want it to have. Then we also provide options for name and description and the path. And essentially, this allows you to create a human readable name for the team that gets generated. You can set a description for the team, and you can also define where it gets generated. So I am going to copy these from the example that we have. I'm going to remove the path teams because that's unnecessary, because that's already the default value where the team gets generated. And I'm going to run that command. We can see that it generated a new team successfully. And now we're going to take a look what is inside there. So as you can probably see, it's pretty much just a normal team. So we have an info file, we have a team file, we have file for libraries, and I'm going to open the info YAML file first, and you can see that the team name that we specified as part of the command is now here, and the team is extending stable 9. That's what the team is currently doing. If you generate a team, it's extending stable 9, and that's what we sort of recommend there. You can see also the description and some other things that are a little bit more static. So the libraries and libraries extend, but these are also generated so that the libraries that are related to or loaded from this team, we replace the machine name correctly so that they are loaded from here. So for example, the base library, you can see that's defined over here. So as I mentioned earlier, this team is generated from Classy. However, it's not generated from Classy directly. We've created sort of a new team, which we use as the starting point or the source for the teams that are being generated. It's called Starter Kit team. It's a regular team. You can see it has all of the things, pretty much all of the things that you saw in the generated team as well. So for example, the base team here is also stable 9. We just mark it as hidden, and that's something we don't do. We just remove that from the team that we generated. All of the templates, CSS at the moment, they've been just copied from Classy, except that we've made some minor changes to some documentation just to remove references to Classy and make it more suitable for the generated teams. So next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to refresh appearance page on my Drupal installation on my local. We can see a new custom team over here. The description is what we set on the CLI command, and I'm going to install this. And I'm going to set to my preferred team. So this tool just to sort of switch over different teams quickly. And right here, we have Drupal using a team generated using the Starter Kit team generator. And the new Starter Kit team is supposed to be added to Drupal core. Okay. So as you can see, that is pretty functional already. So it already generates a team based on the markup that we got from Classy. We do still have some open questions on hard problems we have to solve. For example, we need to decide what kind of customization options we should provide. For example, should we provide an option to include post CSS in the generated team? That's what we use with Claro and Olivero. Then there's also a question, should we provide an option to include JavaScript tooling in the generated team? We also got some proposals that we should add some default JavaScript in there. And if we did that, at the moment, since Drupal core is using Babel to compile our JavaScript, it might make sense to also provide some tooling to be able to sort of get more benefit out of those JavaScript files. We also need to decide on whether we provide some capabilities to pull in changes that have happened in the Starter Kit teams to the generate team, sort of staying up to date to the Starter Kit team. We don't necessarily have a decision on that yet, whether it's something we are going to put a lot of effort into. So your feedback would be appreciated on that. So the next steps that we have are that we want to allow Starter Kit teams to define how the team should be generated. So the demo that I just did was based on sort of a static set of rules that we have defined in the team generator. We want to extend that so that there's an API for teams to use so that they can provide their own steps. For example, the steps that we provide at the moment don't support configuration of items in the config folder. So if your team needed something like that, you could add it using the API. We'll also need some more work to be able to allow deciding which team to use as a starter kit team. So that would essentially mean that you could use some contrib teams or maybe Olivero or something else as the starter kit team. So right now we only have this one starting point, but in future the CLI command could allow other teams to be used as well. And one of the hard problems that I mentioned on the previous slide is also a beta blocker for this. So something that we need to solve, at least on some level, before we can get it in core, is to make updating changes from starter kit teams to generated teams easier. And as part of that, we need to decide sort of how much effort do we want to put on that? Like how much do users expect to update their starter kit teams, generated teams. So we are going to do some contributions around this later today. Join us today and help us test out the new starter kit theme, triage issues to improve the default markup and CSS. So we have lots of issues that are sort of now part of the classic component. We're planning to triage those and see if some of them are relevant to the starter kit theme so that we could sort of easily solve them over there. And I have a few minutes left, I believe. So if there are any questions, I can take a look at the Q&A or chat. So there's one question from Norman. Why is the new team not created in the team/custom folder, but just in teams? Actually, that's a good question. I don't think we really considered the option to generate it in teams custom. I think that's good feedback. We could potentially do something like that if that's something that folks find useful. However, the folder is configurable, so if you need that, you could already do that by just changing the directory on the command in the teams/custom. The next question I have is, could you talk about the differences between stable and stable 9? So stable is basically the module markup that we have taken from Drupal 8.0.0 release. And stable 9 is Drupal 9.0.0 release. So it's more or less the same, but it has all of the BC layers removed and a couple of and some markup and CSS changes that has happened between Drupal 8 and Drupal 9. Do we have any other questions? I think we are probably pretty close to out of time as well. So thank you, everyone. If you have any questions, feel free to join the sprints later. And I'll see you there.